When a baby is born, help from family often feels like a miracle. Sleepless nights blur into exhausting days, emotions run high, and new parents cling to anyone who promises support. That's exactly how it felt for Emily Carter and her husband Daniel Carter after the birth of their first child, a baby boy they named Ethan. Emily was overwhelmed, recovering from childbirth, learning how to care for a newborn, and trying to hold herself together while Daniel spent long hours at work and occasional business trips. So when Daniel's mother, Margaret Carter, offered to come stay with them and help, it sounded like a blessing they couldn't refuse. Margaret lived in a nearby city and worked as a daycare administrator. She was always busy, always important, and rarely showed much interest in Emily before the baby arrived. That sudden concern should have raised alarms, but exhaustion makes people ignore instincts. Emily agreed, telling herself that any help was better than none. Margaret arrived with 2 huge suitcases and immediately took control of the house. From the first hour, she criticized everything: how Emily held the baby, how often she fed him, the way the furniture was arranged, even the food in the fridge. Still, she cooked, cleaned, and took Ethan for walks in his stroller. Emily was too tired to argue. She started believing that maybe becoming a grandmother had softened Margaret. After a few days, Margaret's behavior subtly changed. She began asking strange questions about their belongings. How much did the television cost? Was it bought on installments? Why did they need such an expensive coffee machine? Did they even use the blender? Emily found it odd but brushed it off. Then one morning, while Daniel was away on a work trip, Margaret unplugged the microwave and casually announced she was taking it home. She said it was unnecessary clutter and that she needed one herself. Emily stood there stunned. The microwave was new. They had bought it only a month ago. When Emily hesitated, Margaret confidently said Daniel had agreed already. Exhausted, holding a crying baby, Emily stayed silent. The next day, Margaret packed the coffee machine and the blender. She said Emily didn't drink coffee anyway and that appliances shouldn't go to waste. Emily felt anger boiling inside her, but she had no strength left to fight. Nights without sleep had drained her completely. A couple of days later, Margaret said she would temporarily take the vacuum cleaner because hers had broken. She promised to return it soon. It never came back. Then the electric kettle disappeared. Then the dish set Emily had received as a wedding gift. Each time Emily tried to object, Margaret turned it into emotional blackmail, accusing her of being ungrateful and threatening to leave her alone with the baby. The final blow came when Margaret announced she was taking the television. Emily finally protested, reminding her that the TV was still being paid off. Margaret laughed and said the debt was Emily and Daniel's problem, not hers. Then she moved toward the washing machine. Emily broke down. She begged her not to take it, explaining that she had a newborn and needed to wash clothes daily. Margaret coldly replied that women used to wash by hand and that she had back problems, so she needed the machine more. That same day, Margaret called movers and had the washing machine taken away while Emily cried, holding her baby in the corner of the room. After that, Margaret packed her bags, accused Emily of selfishness and disrespect, and left. Emily was left alone in a half-empty apartment. Most of the appliances were gone. Dishes, towels, even bedding had disappeared. The total value of what Margaret took was nearly $15,000. When Daniel returned from his trip, he didn't believe Emily at first. He walked through the apartment in silence, opening cabinets, staring at empty spaces. "My mom wouldn't do this," he kept repeating. Emily didn't argue. She simply asked him to call her and find out. Margaret didn't deny anything. She said she had every right to take the items and accused Emily of being dramatic and ungrateful. She told Daniel that if he chose his wife over his own mother, he might as well stop calling her altogether. When Daniel ended the call, something in him finally snapped. He left the apartment without a word and returned hours later with movers and a rental truck. He told Emily to get ready. They were going to his mother's house. Margaret panicked when she saw them. She cried, screamed, and tried to block the movers, but Daniel stood firm. He told her that a real mother doesn't steal from her own child. Every appliance, every item she had taken was loaded back into the truck. Margaret threatened to cut Daniel out of her life, cried about sacrifices she had made, and blamed Emily for turning her son against her. Daniel listened in silence and left without responding. Back home, Emily cried, not from anger, but from relief. For the first time in their marriage, she felt truly protected. Daniel apologized for not believing her sooner and admitted that he had spent his whole life obeying his mother without question. That night, he cooked dinner, helped with the baby, and stayed close to Emily, as if afraid to let her down again. Margaret didn't give up easily. She called daily, crying, complaining to relatives, and spreading stories about her ungrateful daughter-in-law. After a week, she showed up at their door with flowers and candy, acting sweet and pretending nothing had happened. Emily calmly asked where the rest of their belongings were. Margaret brushed it off, saying families shouldn't count such small things. Emily closed the door without another word. A month later, Margaret finally returned the remaining items, offering a forced apology through clenched teeth. Emily accepted it, not because she trusted her, but because the most important change had already happened. Daniel had learned to set boundaries. Years passed. Their family grew stronger. Margaret was no longer in control. She was a guest, not an authority. Emily often thought back to that month of silent suffering and wondered how she endured it. But she also knew it had changed everything. She learned to say no. Daniel learned what it meant to be a husband first. And Margaret learned that love does not mean ownership.